Nebraska straight down south into Oklahoma. Is that correct? Or correct me
Well,
on that.
we actually had facilities in Florida, Ohio, Michigan, Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, New Mexico, California, and Oregon. And I don't think I'm leaving any states out. And I actually had an apartment here in Kansas City because I was flying out every 3 days, 4 days a week, and going to some other place, even though we lived in Salina. And about 10 years after that, I decided to stop that, maybe longer, 15, I don't remember. We've gotten out of most of them. We still have kind of the line you're describing of, we sold the Nebraska one a year ago, about 2 years ago now. But we still have three here in Kansas, and one large one in New Mexico that is actually the last half dozen that we've built have been acute care facilities. So we do everything from open hearts. In one of them, we could do transplants. We never did, but open hearts down to whatever, colonoscopies or tonsillectomies. And we employ doctors. We have, we've had probably 150, 200 doctors on the payroll. At that 2 years ago, before we sold our Nebraska facility, in all locations, we probably had close to 3,000 employees, nurses, doctors, whatever.
So you've been involved from the business side in healthcare for 30 plus years now.
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen changed in the field of healthcare during that time?
Already said one, changing from independent to dependent. I've also seen that when we started, about 85 to 90% of all procedures, surgical procedures, were done on an inpatient basis, and 10 plus or minus percentage were done on an outpatient basis. We now are doing about 80% outpatient and 20% inpatient.
Is that due to technological changes, improvements, and
massive improvements?
Yeah.
Hip replacements 30 years ago were a major deal. Today, my brother just had one, and he went in at 9 o'clock, got anesthetized, got into the room at 10:30. At 11:30, he walked out with a walker, and has felt his statement. I've had toothaches that hurt worse than this. That's because they don't cut any muscle anymore. They used to, you'd have a 12-inch incision down your hip, and they would cut the muscles in half, go in and replace the hip. And today they separate the muscle because the muscles are all strands. And you do cut the what's the skin layer on the outside.
Yeah.
This tells you how much I really know about medicine. Not much. I know about the business. In fact, when I talk to doctors about doing a new project, I'd say, I'm not going to try to tell you how to run your medical practice. I want you to provide the best medical care anybody can provide. And by the way, my hospitals are all in the top 10 nationwide by Medicare standards. 2 here in Kansas are in the top 5. And in New Mexico, that hospital is a 4-star out of 5. And the other 2 hospitals in town are 1-star. So we run top-notch facilities, very low infection rates, high-quality output, and customer satisfaction. But so that's an example. I mean, there's so much that's outpatient, and there's no question that people like that by far better than staying in a hospital. It's kind of interesting that most people, 3 months after they were almost dying, what they'll remember is, did we feed them well and take good care of them? And was the personal touch there. When we opened the new hospital in Nebraska, we had a birthing unit, and we gave every mother a pedicure and manicure and a hair makeover before they left, after they had a baby in our facility. We got the greatest reviews you've ever seen. But that's something that I absolutely know. So I went to Wichita State for business education occasionally, to learn like how to motivate the unmotivated employee. Well, I can tell you that doesn't work.
I was like, certainly they didn't have any answers for that, did they?
Well, they thought they did, but there's an example of education taking you down the wrong path.
Yeah.
It was social education, not business education.
Right.
And so where was I going with that? Oh, when we build a new hospital, you will never have a happier group of employees than the first few dozen or 100 that are in there. And it's because they are expected to do 120% of what they really can do every day. They never get done everything that's demanded of them in a day. But they never sit around in the coffee room and complain. They're always, I am needed, man. I've got to go file. I've got to get the sterile packets ready. I've got the real reason for the happiness that's involved in building a new facility and making it successful is that every employee is needed, and they go home knowing they're needed, and they come back tomorrow knowing they've got a job that's needed and important, and so their life is fulfilled. When you let employees sit around and complain or not complain, if a surgery's canceled for whatever reason, because a patient comes in sick, you can't do the surgery. Our nurses never go to the break room. There's papers to file in the business office. There is, sterile packets to prepare. There is instrumentation that was opened for the surgery. Now it's got to go back to the sterilizer. There's always something to do, and we have very little turnover, and we get the pick of the litter, if you will, of any nurse in town. They want to come work for us because it's a happy existence. People like it. People like to be needed.
Mm-hmm. You feel part of something.
And I think one of the things that is missing a lot in industry today is hard work. I'm not saying everybody does it, but in a lot of jobs today, there's idleness. There's the idea of having lots of time on your hands. Who wants that? I mean, that breeds staleness in the mind and weak hands.
Yeah.
And you need that purpose. You need that call. You need that passion. You need to be needed, as you were saying.
That's my whole point. So I don't know if we got off track here, but so we did that one. Next thing you know, a doctor in a neighboring town heard about it, called us up. We did another one pretty soon. In reality, we've probably done well over 100 facilities, but some of them I don't count as surgical centers because, as you might know, if you do a procedure in your office, a doctor would get what's called an adder. So that to see the patient, they get $50. If you saw them, they get $50. If they do a procedure, they get another $50. If that same procedure though might have a surgical center coding number. If you do it in a surgery center, the surgery center probably gets 1,000 to 5,000, and so we set up dozens of in-office surgery centers. We just cut out a slice of the building, set it up as a legal surgery center, licensed it, contracted with payers, and started doing all those procedures as in-office surgery suites. And so we did lots of those in Tennessee and Michigan, all over. So, but real facilities that I built, high 30s.
Where do you find yourself today?
About 5 years ago, maybe a little longer, probably longer, probably 10 years ago, I started preparing for it, where I was selling businesses actually 30 years ago, because what I did was built relationships with high net worth individuals. Go clear back to the early conversation about who you hang around with. there's an old saying that you spend the first 20 years of your life building your reputation, you spend the last 20 living off of it. And that's where I'm at. I built all these relationships. I made a lot of people successful. I mean, I could probably say that I've made a couple hundred people millionaires, and some of them multimillionaires. Oh, so it is who you hang around with, and I have these relationships with probably 400 people now that are high net worth individuals. And I took that relationship a few years ago and started finding a variety of other businesses to get involved with. And I have always been about diversity. I don't believe anything is immune to failure. Healthcare, when I got into that, the government was predicting that 25% of our gross domestic product would be in healthcare. And we're getting there. We're almost there. At the time I started, it was something closer to 15%. But what a huge number! And my opinion of that was, well, if I just get crumbs, I'll be successful. So along that way, I built all these relationships and started finding business because, as you said, doctors may not be good businessmen. I would tell you that some of them are great businessmen. I would also tell you that all the bankruptcies I did were primarily businessmen, and they weren't good businessmen. So I don't think you can classify. I think it's the same segment of society. If 5 or 10% of society is good businessmen, there's 5 or 10% of doctors that are good businessmen. And if 5 or 10% of the society is a bunch of crooks, there's 5 or 10% of medicine that's a bunch of crooks. I mean, there's no. Just because you're a doctor doesn't make you a stellar human being, but just because you're a doctor doesn't also make you a bad businessman or an immoral one. I've dealt with lots of fabulous doctors. So I built that relationship, and I have constantly been approached by people wanting me to invest or participate. And so I've been, we are partners in assisted living centers, dementia centers. I'm partner. I helped start a bank. We owned a relatively small bank by today's standards, anyway. We had investments in speculation of land and development of buildings. We've built lots of medical office buildings, I don't know, millions of square feet. And we got into, we're actually in lending right now. It's called Pioneer Military Lending here in Kansas City. We lend $3,000 kind of average to soldiers across the world, mostly up to E5, E6, E7 grade. And sadly, our government doesn't pay for those men and women to be deployed. They have to buy a certain number of uniforms and so forth every time they're transferred or deployed. And they're making relatively low wages as an enlisted man, and they need help. So we give them those loans. A bank won't do it, and credit cards won't do it. We've been open a little over a year, and we're already breaking even. And I think within 3 to 4 years, we'll be kind of killing it. So another source, I am in fast food.
Yeah, you've gotten in food and beverage now, haven't you?
Yeah, mostly because I found an operator that was fantastic, super honest, great moral character, and we're the largest Freddy's franchisee in the nation. We have a franchise we're starting for coffee, mochas. We've got half a dozen locations, or when they're all open, there'll be half a dozen locations to start with. So we've got that.